Good morning, everyone. My name is Faith, and I am your host for today. Welcome to the webinar jointly organized by IPI and Enterprise Singapore on how will the conscious consumer drive the future of food. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. As all attendees will be muted throughout the session, if you have any questions for the speakers, please make use of the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. The link to download the slides will be sent to you after we have received a feedback form at the end of the webinar. Please also note that this webinar will be recorded. A link of the video recording will be shared over email to all registered participants. Before we start, allow me to give a quick introduction of IPI for the benefit of those who are not familiar with us. IPI is a wholly owned subsidiary of Enterprise Singapore. It acts as an innovation catalyst to enable enterprises to grow through technology and innovation. Some of the services we provide include technology scouting, technology landscape study, open innovation, workshops, and online technology marketplace. Early this year, IPI has also operationalized the new Innovation Advisors Programme, which supports Singapore enterprises in their innovation journey and accelerate their growth. This is done through bespoke advisory by industry experts who are bilingual in technology as well as in business. Do check out our IPI website to find out more about this program. Today, we are very excited to have 4 of our innovation advisors with us. Together with Enterprise Singapore, they will be sharing their insights on how companies can tap on the emerging conscious consumer trend in the food industry. Let me now introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Ramachandra Rajamanikam. Rama is an innovation advisor and has vast regional experience in the healthcare industry with a focus on innovation and marketing. He was Vice President, Science and Innovation at DSM Nutritional Products Asia Pacific, where he led market-relevant innovation projects that expanded the DSM portfolio. Before joining DSM, he was Corporate Vice President for Abbott's Nutrition Asia Pacific, where he was deeply involved in driving innovation and building multiple new businesses to accelerate growth. Let me now hand the time over to Mr. Rama.
Thank you, Faith, for that kind introduction. Okay. Sorry, let me start again. I wanted to thank Faith, first of all, and share that it's my privilege to welcome all participants and panelists to today's webinar. And I think based on the signups, it has generated a lot of interest. So we're looking forward to a very good discussion. I also attribute the signups to the topic, which I think is very much forefront in a lot of people's minds. But more than that, also the panel that is going to be addressing us later on. So without further ado, let me start by introducing the panel. First of all, we have Clarence Ho, who will come on screen shortly, I believe. He's currently Global Markets Director, Americas and Western Europe with Enterprise Singapore. And as we know, this is the government agency championing enterprise development. He's been helping companies innovate and internationalize since 2005 in a variety of roles. At one point, he was Center Director in Sao Paulo and acted as also the Director of the Infrastructure Services Division. Clarence has also been a Human Resources Director of IE Singapore, International Enterprise Singapore, from 2012 to 2018. And was at one time with JDC Corporation and also the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Delighted to have you, Clarence.
Thank you.
The next 3 panelists I will introduce are also fellow innovation advisors, and Faith outlined earlier on what innovation advisors do. So let me start with Dr. Ong Mei Hong.
Good morning, everybody.
Dr. Ong is currently Food Accelerator Mentor for Big Idea Ventures Singapore. She is also an adjunct professor for food science and technology at the National University of Singapore. And comes with deep industry experience with over 25 years in F&B companies, and these are household names Nestle, Mars, Cadbury, FNN, Vitasoy, and has exposure in also Europe, Oceania, and Asia. Dr. Ong was also formerly Chief Scientific Officer of FNN. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Ong. Next, we have Isabella Tan. Isabella currently serves as a board member at Halogen Foundation, Singapore. Again, with over 25 years of commercial experience covering ASEAN and Greater China regions in the fast-moving consumer goods. She's managed household names, again, like Maggi, Nescafe, and brands, all familiar to us. Formerly, she was the Vice President and General Manager at brands Suntory Asia, responsible for Singapore, Philippines, and export markets. So again, thank you for joining us, Isabella. And last but not least, we have Bridget Ziller joining us. Bridget is the founder of Starting for Good in Singapore, providing consultancy to F&B science-based startups. Again, a veteran, she has 25 years of international experience in the F&B industry, having held leadership positions in Nestle, Unilever, Danone, and Fonterra. Added to this, she was also the former category Insight and Innovations Director, Nestle at Greater China region. So she brings in consumer perspectives to today's discussion as well. So delighted to have you join us as well, Bridget. Couple of quick logistics for today's discussion. For the first 40 minutes or so, we will give the panel speakers a chance to share their perspectives and their broad experience. And then we will transition over to take questions from the audience. However, please do send in the questions. You don't have to wait for Q&A time. You'll see a Q&A tab at the bottom, and I believe if you're using a Mac, it'll be at the top. Do plug in your questions at any time so that we can get to them right away once the panel's formal discussion finishes. At this point in time, I just wanted to share a little bit before I hand over to the panel to share a few slides and so on. The term conscious consumer can be very broad and sends each of our minds in different directions. What exactly is this conscious consumer? So just to ground us for today's discussion, just want to make sure we're all aligned that we are talking about the consumer who is making conscious choices based on his or her set of preferences or values that may differ from the traditional. They may make choices based on intrinsic values still, for example, health benefits, but then they are also influenced by broader overarching considerations. Example, how the product is produced, its source, origin, sustainability. So these are all at the back of mind, influencing choice consistently. And then the onset of COVID has further entrenched and even accelerated some of these consumer choices or trends. In IPI and ESG, we believe many of our local companies, with some tweaking and innovation adjustments on product, packaging, perhaps some go-to-market options, can take steps to embrace this growing opportunity quickly. Today, Bridget and Clarence on our panel will first share what drives and influences these consumer choices, as well as share examples. And later on, with Dr. Ong, Isabella, and the broader panel, we will explore more about the business and technical considerations for these market and innovation opportunities, possible pathways of going to market, relevant communications, hurdles to look out for, how to navigate, and also what help and support both ESG and IPI can offer to our Singapore companies to make it all very real and timely. At this point in time, it's my pleasure to hand over to Bridget and Clarence to help share the landscape and the opportunity for this fast-growing trend and why the time is now. Bridget and Clarence, over to you, please.
Thank you, Rana. So before we start about what does it mean today in terms of opportunity, I would like first to remind us about what is a food revolution and who are the consumers who have already started the food revolution. So before COVID-19, we had already this millennium, which are the younger and more engaged generation of consumers, and even the generation Z, who are pushing the trends forward. So the first is about they want to eat, they are lifestyle consumers and they want to eat healthier. They are also open to pay a premium if they are convinced that the product or the brand is offering healthy food. Because this is a generation or everything has to be quick, everything has to be accessible, this is also the generation which is pushing the shift to smaller grocery and online. Like convenience stores on e-commerce in terms of trends are growing faster, for example, from a shopping mall or a hypermarket. But this is also the generation who influence the parents. So they're expecting from brands more transparency. They are expecting for brands more authenticity, more trust. They are looking for brands which give action to their values. They are open to collaboration. We saw even in the fashion industry, Adidas, Nike, asking consumers to do co-innovation with them. It's the same in a food, for example, in the snack industry. And they are also pushing brands to be more committed to do good. So that's why these consumers are so important, because with the COVID, next slide, we saw that their values actually started to be embraced by, I would not say the mainstream consumers, but by more consumers. So what has changed with the COVID and what has accelerated? First, what has changed, as we know that, more home consumption. Of course, we are locked down. It's obvious, more home consumption, but it's also more budget to food. What people do, they do more cooking, they do more DIY categories, they do baking, they are mixing ingredients for beverage, they want to reinvent the coffee shop experience at home. And we saw on Instagram very nice video of people embracing out of home at home. We saw as well, and some big company in the food industry has given their numbers, that retail growth was growing around 5 to 6%. And by chance, it could help a little bit to compensate the loss in out of home, which was around minus 30 or 40%. And people have also embraced new way to be delivered at home, as some restaurants were very creative and started to do a direct delivery. But what has accelerated, as we know all, it's a concern of security, which is going beyond safety. It's about a new concept of value, which is going beyond affordability. People started to put health and nutrition as a top priority and looking at trust and origin as a way of transparency. And as I said, everything which is digital was also accelerated with the COVID. So based on that, we relook at the pyramid of needs, and we look at it in the context of the COVID. So at the bottom of the pyramid, it's about safety, but I think with the COVID is more and more about hygiene plus safety. So here people are worried, they are stressed, and our role as a food provider is to make these people more free of mind and thinking to be more comfortable. So what does it mean? It means in terms of product to be no negative. It's about free from. I think one of the biggest free from is actually no sugar, no added sugar. It's about transparency and trust and authenticity. The second need, it's about redefined value. So value is not about cheap, it's not only about promotion, but it's about buying what is essential. It's about consume less, but consume better. So what does it mean on the left for a product? It's about doing what is right for the product and for the consumers. So it's about looking for natural ingredients, it's about the clean label, It's about having a list of ingredients which is shorter and more simple to understand. The third need is going beyond value, is about bringing something positive to consumer. It's something which is linked to health. So, but we know that not everyone is looking for health. But I think with COVID, we know that more than 30 to 40% of the consumer are putting health as a first choice. So positing health, what does it mean? We know that with the COVID, everyone is talking about immunity. We know that people are very stressed, they cannot sleep, they want some more energy, they are tired. So there are a lot of consumer benefit behind health. But it's also about actually packaging, because when we talk about health as a choice, as health as my flexible choice, it's about bringing to product what is useful, not only what is nice to have. It's also where we can talk about natural ingredient, again, where we talk about organic. People are looking for something organic. We have also the trend on flexitarian, which is going beyond vegan. And it's about how your brand or your product can bring positive nutrition message and claims. And moving forward, we have what we call redefined premium. So redefined premium is no more the crazy Asians, but it's more about you. It's about you as the owner of a company. It's about what is your story? What is your purpose? What do you want to say with your brands or with your product? So we know as well that with the COVID, people don't have the experience to go abroad. So being Asian, it's an exciting part of the world and in Singapore. So you can bring this Asian experience at home in an export market. So what is this Asian experience? It's about being innovative. It's about leveraging wellness, which is body and mind, but also lifestyle. It's about simplicity and purity. And also because you have many brands, we have a strong heritage in Asia. It's also bringing a modern twist to this brand heritage. So here you see there are many opportunities behind these new consumer needs, where you can tap depending what is your brand, your category, and your positioning. So now I leave it to Clarence to move on.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Once again, a good morning and good evening to everyone in this seminar. Sending my well wishes all the way from New York itself. Well, building on what Bridget has shared, we start to see, actually in this slide, the higher we move up the pyramid of needs, it nicely coincides with the 3 food trends that we would like to talk about today. They are, in blue, health and wellness, which spans across all levels in the pyramid, the clean label products in red, and the sustainable practices in green. And each of these trends actually presents potential market opportunities in North America and Western Europe. Before talking about these opportunities, we would like to just take the next slide to go deeper, to comprehensively look at what the components of each of these 3 trends are. Starting with the first one, which is health and wellness, where we have defined it as food that uses alternative ingredients or enhanced and fortified ingredients, or the exclusion of ingredients to achieve the health and wellness objective. Example, organic, vegan, alternative proteins, and food that are free from allergens, glutens, or dairy. Next, we have the clean label, which will be food that have greater emphasis on having the all natural ingredients and minimal processing. Lastly, for sustainability, it will be the focus on how the source, production process, and the delivery are done to achieve the sustainability goals, like ethical sourcing, implementing waste reduction, and adopting sustainable packaging. And here we'd like to emphasize again the increasing importance of branding, because customers in US and Europe are demanding to hear your story, build the emotional connection, experience the product, which leads to deepen trust and generate growth for you. Next slide. So with that, based on the market data and also on the ground sensing, we would like to share a quick overview, simplified heat map to illustrate where we think the window of opportunity is. We focus our attention on 4 key markets in our coverage and where we actually assess the growth potential to be the highest. First, the US. the world's largest as well as most sophisticated consumer market, where customers demand food products to have all three attributes actually, albeit at differing extent. So at present, organic products are commonplace in mainstream supermarkets, and certification is increasingly becoming a prerequisite, even for products considered for distribution. For clean labeling, the market is poised to grow significantly to US 12.98 billion by 2023, at a CAGR of about 6 to 7%. For sustainability, studies have shown that sustainability marketed products are responsible for more than half the growth in packaged food products and are growing 7 times faster than their conventional counterparts. And looking ahead, we also see 2 upcoming demand in the near horizon in US. With COVID-19, we observe the return of functional foods that are perceived to be able to improve immunity and health, especially gut health. So probiotics is in a trend. We also anticipate increasing growth in free from food. And one key driver is the huge allergy issue that is in the US. So do you know that there are actually 32 million people with food allergies in US? And do you know that looking at insurance data claims, treatment of severe allergic reactions have increased close to 400% in the last 10 years. So hence new product launches making claims with reduced or no allergens continue to soar. So next I'll talk about Germany. It is the largest market for organic food in Europe and is continuing to grow. In the last decade, the market grew from 5.85 billion to now 12 billion euros. Most supermarket chains have introduced private labels for organic food products with EU certification. Even discount supermarkets are doing so. And some are selling products of higher organic standard by German Organic Food Association, which is called Bioland. Third one, France. The clean label demand market is gaining pace. A study has shown that market share of clean label products increased from 13% in 2008 to 20% and more in 2020. And interesting to note that 85% of French customers actually read the label and check the ingredients and check what constitutes to it before buying it. And 90% actually prefer no additive. So because of this, we observe many food manufacturers are cleaning up the ingredients of their products. And also, clean label has been particularly used by local Asian food distributors to develop a premium range of products to be sold at a higher price. Lastly, we have the UK. It is about the vegan food market. This is driven by the high popularity of flexitarian diets and a strong awareness of environmental issues related to meat production. As a result, the UK is now Europe's largest market for plant-based foods, and almost a quarter of all new UK food products launches in 2019 were labeled as vegan. Supermarket chains are stocking more vegan options, like Tesco developed their own plant-based vegan products called Wicked Kitchen since 2017. Within 3 years, they have expanded their starting product line of 20 to 90 products, and they're looking to launch more. So next slide. So now various Singapore companies are actively looking at these markets and making inroads. So I thought it would be interesting to share some examples and approaches that they have taken. First, we have noticed that Singapore companies leverage our Asian heritage and tweaked it to include health and wellness angle. Coca Foods retained their Asian flavors in the noodles, but invested in developing a full range of low-fat instant noodles with no MSG, coloring, and preservatives. So now their products are distributed over 50 countries, including North America, UK, France, Germany, Spain, Belgium, Sweden, and Finland. Mackellar Living. This is actually a company that created a clean label brand of Asian sauces that is organic, all natural, gluten and nut-free, vegan-friendly, with ingredients that are easily found in a typical kitchen. And this company is interesting because they went further to incorporate sustainability. They adopted wastage reduction in their processing and avoided animal content and the use of plastic. So this, as a result, their products are currently distributed in North America, amongst other regions. And the company has raised 1 million Singapore dollars seed funding for their US expansion. Next slide. We also have companies that took their products to shift away from the Asian heritage, like Uncle Saba Papadum. I mean, papadum, everyone knows that is papadum chips, but actually lentils is also a healthy ingredient, rich in protein and fiber, and gluten-free and vegan. Because of this, Uncle Saba focuses now on marketing their lentil instead of their ethnic, and they are making inroads into Europe substantially. Likewise with Fossa chocolates that focus on making sustainable, locally sourced, ethically sourced chocolates to be distributed into Europe. And lastly, I would like to also share, next slide, that we have another company that didn't just tweak, but they went further. They look at investing in innovation to create new products to capture the market. Growthwell, a vegetarian mock meat food product manufacturer, recognized this trend, repositioned themselves to be a plant-based food innovation company. So now they've started exploring various food development, like working with an Israeli startup to develop product using 90% chickpeas protein isolate so that they can enhance the nutritional value of their food. And this has gotten the attention of Temasek, who made investment into this company. And Bridget, I believe you have also encountered some interesting companies and approaches.
I will present some introduction to other company. Here it's a very interesting Thai brand, which is Blue Elephant. And they illustrate very well the trend of redefining premium, because it's a brand heritage, but in the same time with a modern twist, in the sense that when they do export to other markets, they want to explain not only about the authenticity of the dish, which is red curry, but also it fits to different type of consumers, if they are gluten-free, if they are vegetarian, and they reassure as well on natural. But what is also interesting in this case is at the back of the pack there is a restaurant, and it's why they call it handmade. So I think it's a great opportunity after COVID for all the restaurants which are starting to deliver directly to their customers to also, why not, develop your own brand. So the next example is a mayonnaise. You know, mayonnaise is a soya sauce for Western Europe or for US, you put it everywhere. So here again, it's an example of redefining premium, because it's about adopt a product which is sold very well in Western market, but adapt and make your story more exciting, because you can bring some new twist of Asia with exciting spices, exciting flavor. So here it's about West meets East. So you can, of course, target what we call the new generation, but also because it's delicious, you target a more conscious consumer. The next example is coming from New Zealand. Here it's very different. It's not a packaged food, but it's an example of retail. And here the story is about, when you talk about sustainability, think about your value chain from grass to glass, if we are in the dairy industry, or to the wet market, if you are in the fresh ingredient industry. So here, this is example of in New Zealand, where by putting out completely the plastic and recreating a fresh ambience of a wet market, but of course with more hygiene and no worries, the sales could increase by 300%. So it's a very good example of sustainability. The last example is a private label. So I was talking at the beginning about back to essential. And Clarence was talking as well about no additives, right? Free from. So here it's a private label, is Intermarché, which has a full range of private label. The name is L'Essentiel, which is essential. And what they put on their claims is no coloring, no preservative, no additives, right? And on the front of the pack, they just say, that's all. That's exactly the ingredient list I have on the front because I'm proud of it. So here it's a very interesting example how private label as well in Europe start to embrace the conscious consumer. To you, Clarence.
Thank you, Bridget. And I would like to thank you for sharing the private label example. We think it is an important go-to-market channel to consider, and it works best for companies who want to focus on food manufacturing competencies and leverage on the established brands that is already in the market. We also think that the B2B model, selling into food service, is a channel that we should look at, which is beyond the traditional distribution model. With these, we actually do have partners and network to be able to help our companies to better access these markets through these models. But I'd like to share one which is interesting, which is the subscription box. Recently, we have seen an increasing growth in this market. This is actually a very good channel for companies with products like snacks, ready-to-eat meals, and beverages who use this approach to want to gauge customers' response or as a way to get initial track record, which bigger distributors sometimes look for. And each of them have different models, of which I will be glad to share them with you. Next slide. So, if we have whetted your appetite by now, and you'd like to embark on this journey, we think there are 3 areas that you might first start in as you concoct your strategy and efforts. They are about the changes or tweaks or innovation in the products that I need to consider, or how do I go to market, or how do I enhance my branding. And ESG IPI are keen to able to work with you in each of these areas through our networks of partners in Singapore and overseas. For example, under food innovation, actually companies can leverage on IPI services for tech scouting, and also from the Innovation Advisors Programme, where you can seek partnership from a pool of innovation advisors who are here with us today. Or you can work with other partners like Food Valley, which is in Netherlands, which has strong ability to do R&D, and they are working with our companies to do so. Likewise, in go-to-markets, we also have established partners as well as in the area of branding and marketing, with track record and also with ability to help Singapore companies to better access US as well as developing Europe regions. Next slide. Lastly, we can also share what some of the FTAs that our companies can tap on to increase their competitive advantage. For example, the EU-Singapore FTA, which came into force in November 2019. Singapore companies can now benefit from the elimination of tariffs on qualifying food products over the next 5 years. And it is also the first bilateral FTA where Singapore incorporated the enhanced market access for Asian foods products made in Singapore. So these products can now enter EU tariff-free under the flexible rules of origin of up to a combined quota of 1,200 tons annually. So Asian foods are like hakao, roti prata, fish balls, where their main ingredients are sourced around ASEAN, but significantly processed in Singapore, can qualify for tariff-free when they enter EU. So quite a lot has been shared about changing needs, new market opportunities, and approaches that companies took. With that, I pass the time back to Rama.
Great. Thank you, Clarence, and thank you, Bridget, for a very insightful and context-setting discussion. I think it laid out very clearly and helped us define who this consumer is and how they make the choices with examples. So takeaways for me, I think a picture paints 1,000 words. So I think the pyramid that you guys shared on the left is self-explanatory in terms of how consumers make their choices today, overlaid with other concerns. The second takeaway for me is COVID-19, as much as it has been disruptive, it also presents a window of opportunity in the changing patterns of purchases and choices. And last but not least, is sometimes we think of innovation as terribly complex and a major production, but it can also be very simple. And the good news is both ESG and IPI are keen and able to work closely with companies and offer connections and networking in the ecosystem for those interested to embark on this journey together. So that was a great context-setting discussion. Without further ado, let me bring in the other panelists for their thoughts. So while Bridget and Clarence set the big picture, the opportunity for us in terms of, call it the landing zone, if you like, on the other side, what we also need to do is to pay attention to what do we need to do on this side on our launch pad. So first, let me address this question to Dr. Ong for her thoughts on what has been shared. So while the opportunity is exciting, Dr. Ong, the key is to make impact on the ground. So based on your experience with the F&B industry, could you share some of your business considerations, including technical challenges that we need to address for our SMEs who are looking to capture these opportunities?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Rama, for the very good question. Thanks also, Clarence and Bridget, to share all the insight from overseas. I guess before I start talking and answering to the question, I just share with the team about the Singapore food industry landscape. So typically, we are talking about a total annual output of 10.7 billion, and of which 6.4 billion are for export, which is about 60%. But the current status is most of the export are to the Asian countries, which we are very familiar with. And therefore, this forum set a scene for how do we want to export overseas beyond Asia, that is to North America as well as Europe. With that, I will have the first slide, please. So I took the opportunity to classify the Singapore food industry into 3 types. That's for simplicity. So first, I'm talking about the existing food company in Singapore who already have product as well as manufacturing capabilities, who may have already export their products overseas, like Coca example. They can be confectionery, dairies, sauces, noodles, or seafood or cooked food, or everything. They will be able to embark on any innovation or renovation project for export overseas. But then we look at the type 2 type of companies, which I classified them as a Singapore new gen food tech. Typically, they are new venture. They are micro and smaller. They build their company with a purpose. Could be environmental, could be plant-based, could be also talking about health and nutrition. They too have a role to play for export overseas. The third type is still cooking. It's why I classified them as breakthrough innovation or food tech or food intel. They also have a role to play for export. They may be still developing, finalizing the standard, or even scaling up. They may eventually have the potential to sell the product or the technology, because typically their technology will be patented. And they too have a role to play for export. So bear in mind with these 3 types of food industry in Singapore, then we are talking about the journey, how to export to overseas, in this case, North America as well as Europe. Can I have the second slide, please? So I think Bridget has very well clearly defined the pyramid, the new pyramid as a consequence of COVID-19 pandemic. Clarence has also very detailed classified and explained the opportunity for the food trend, health and wellness through food. People see food as a type of medicine nowadays, as also clean label products, as well as sustainable practices. So what I have on the right-hand side is to map out how do I choose which product to go. How do I innovate and what product? So you can see there are 4 types of innovation. So what I classify as type 0, which are typically tactical margin improvement, and in this case, maybe regulatory changes because of to export overseas. And then the second type is like renovation, just like you renovate your kitchen because you want better facility and because of you cook more often at home now. We too renovate product and also packaging in order to meet the new needs of the consumer. So there's another type where I classify as strategy innovation. These are typically brand building. You want to extend your brand globally. This is for your company growth platform. And the last one, I classified them as breakthrough innovation. These one are typically new inventions, science-driven, technology-driven. They need new business model. They may need new brand and also venture and technology. So let's recap back the effect of COVID-19. So in this slide on the right-hand side, I'm trying to summarize COVID-19 will significantly accelerate and provide opportunity for typically type 0 and renovation product that will fit into the needs of the bottom part of the pyramid, as well as address all the 3 food trends. Likewise, for the type C, which is a breakthrough innovation, maybe that's more suitable for the type B type of food industry, where they want to test market new product, when they are able to take the risks a bit more, and they also want to grow a new brand. So each of the industry actually have a role to play in terms of opportunity to export overseas, in this case talking about developed country in North America and Europe. With that, we go to the next slide. So it's not just the product, it's not just identify the right product and the consumer needs and experience. So what I'm sharing here are very basic, I use the word winning formula for this new conscious consumer market. So we also need to have a holistic health and sustainability approach. Technical people will call that product life cycle management. Gone are the day you just focus on the product and design the recipe and sell the product. You need to think about the holistic system. You need to think about the consumer usage, services that you're going to provide, and more importantly now, the packaging disposable and also the food waste disposable. Consumer will use that to make their decision whether to buy your product or not. The third point is we need to work cleverly, internal and externally collaboratively. This is talking about open innovation, strategic partnership, or even by public-private partnership. I think Clarence has also shared the opportunity to work with the Overseas Food Innovation Center, as well as the local Food Innovation Center, as well as IPI, to take your product, to modify, to work together and launch overseas. Last but not least, equally important, if not more important, is building capability now and immediately. And it's not just talking about building capability for R&D, for marketing, it's the entire value chain. Right from ingredient sourcing, if you're talking organic, you really truly need to understand the organic product, recipe, product development, manufacturing capability, packaging and material and format, as well as the transportation, storage and handling, because all this will affect the quality of the product and the acceptance by the consumer. Then we go to the next slide, please. This is my last slide. So how to go to the market? Typically, innovation will start with a business case. You choose the right product, you understand the basic fundamental, you develop some financial, you do some maths, yeah? And then you also have a cross-functional innovation team. It's not just run by one or two departments, it's the whole business, it's the whole entire company's effort. And typically a dedicated resource for export is actually very useful. So you can focus on export project or process. First and most important, consumer understanding, I described already, and customers understanding. Typically, R&D will start with the technical part, regulatory check. Bearing in mind, European as well as America's regulatory standard is very different from us. Therefore, this will also determine the degree of innovation, degree of investment, as well as also the timing of the product to launch overseas. You also have to bear in mind the regulatory standard of the importing country as well as exporting unit. We need to be able to manufacture the product locally. If the ingredient is not approved by the local authority, you either have to change the ingredient or you get approval from the local authority, and that will take time. After regulatory check, typically people will check manufacturing, or people already do some screening before. Should I produce in-house, just another SKU, or should I go OEM in local market? Or should I go OEM overseas? Those are the routes you can take. And those will impact on the product quality and the cost as well as timing. Then you talk about shelf life. It's a very common topic for export. How do you manage shelf life? Everybody wanted long shelf life, but you have to balance between the shelf life and the quality of the product. The quality of the product here we are talking about is talking about quality product from the ex-factory after manufacturing to the point of consumption at the consumer, which is this overseas, is America or is in Europe. So you have to take responsibility of the quality of the entire value chain. With that, we need a very reliable local as well as overseas supply chain and logistic vendor. And they will be your partner to make it successful or not. If they did not do well, you will have a lot of problems no matter how good your product is after manufacturing. Last but not least, I thought it's important to put down some contingency plan. To say that we all try our best to do all the diligence to make it successful. But to some unfortunate cases, something may happen. Therefore, this is very important. We have to continuously improve and develop. And should there be any failure, we need to learn how to resilient and bounce back. Statistics have shown you that 95% of the new product launch fail in the first year. The key words here is not fail. The key words here is fail in the first year. And therefore, you need to continue to monitor and improve and create new product or renovate so that you can meet the real consumer needs of the overseas market. So if I were to summarize the 3 key messages, one will be talking about what to do, understand your consumer very well, understand your customer very well, understand your market very well. Secondly is how to do. Should I do it in-house? How to collaborate internally, externally, in your home country, as well as in the overseas market. So open innovation, collaborative mindset is very important from day one. Thirdly is be prepared, good and bad. You have to accept it, how to move forward by learning fast, fail fast, or if you continue to improve because the competitor will come in and also compete with you seriously. Competitor could also be from the home market. So that is important for us to continue to be vigilant about your product. So treat export as a serious business as part of your business strategy. With that, I hope I answered your question, and if not, we can talk about it later. Thank you.
Great, Dr. Ong. Thank you very much. So I think what you've done is really opened up the vista of permutations and opportunities for us to explore, shared with us a nice framework, ending off with 3 key takeaways. So that was very helpful. Having said that, obviously the other part of it, we can build a lot of science and benefits into our products, but they'll remain our best kept secret unless we communicate it well. So for that, I'm going to call upon Isabella to share with us a little bit more about marketing execution. How do we communicate brand promise, differentiate from the competition, and for some of these considerations. So with that, Isabella, could I ask you to comment, please?
Thank you, Rama. So before I go and elaborate on the answer, I would say to plan for 1 year, you usually grow your sales. To plan for 3 years, you grow your channels. And to plan to grow for decades, you actually have to grow your brand. So to build a successful longer-term business with your consumers, we need to grow strong brands. And strong brands are founded on the premise of quality products that go through the rigor of what Dr. Ong has mentioned, that kind of a process and thinking. And knowing our consumers well is like the cornerstone of growing strong brands, right? So with the landscape that's constantly evolving and COVID bringing the future forward, we have companies that, they need to know their customers better, the consumers better. What do the conscious consumers care about? Their attitudes towards health and sustainability, as well as their willingness to pay, etc. Some of which has been captured in the pyramid already, at a high level. And we have also seen digital adoption accelerated, right? With that, you can expect consumers to be more savvy digitally, and they are better informed and demanding. So the new imperative is really to know your consumers and know them better than the competition. Okay, so knowing is one thing, and translating what you know into a superior value proposition and delivering on the brand promise is quite another thing. Conscious consumers, they want their products to make them healthier, their lives simpler and better. They want to feel good about their purchases, that their purchases do good to the society, to the environment. So to focus your business on the value proposition, it is important to play to your strength, because your ability to win matters as much as the attractiveness of the market opportunity. So think what you're really good at. Is it your distribution, your formulation, or your processing technology, or even customer experience, or your heritage, your Asian heritage? So whatever it is, play to your strength. If I can have my first slide up, please. So Clarence mentioned earlier about elevating your brand beyond the product. So I want to share a good example from a US startup brand that tells, in my view, it's pretty good brand story, founded on quality products. So since its launch in 2016, this brand, Vive Organic, their sales of a range of plant-based organic wellness shots has been growing by leaps and bounds. It caters to consumers with a proactive health approach, and they also consumers who seek to boost their immunity, especially during this time, is highly relevant. So their brand story, if you go to their website or if you look up their communications and content online, you can find that the way they tell their story is highly relatable, it has resonance, and it's highly credible and makes a emotional connection with the consumers. For example, when you go to the website, or even if you get your hands on their product, the claims of organic, non-GMO, vegan, plant-powered, all these claims are definitely on trend. In fact, like if I go back to the pyramid, it's the lower end of the pyramid, right? So they're hitting that. And they're also making claims of naturalness and potency of their drinks. Now, they don't just say, okay, I'm a natural product and it's very potent, but they back it up with very strong points. If you, again, in their communication, for example, they use high pressure processing, which is HPP technology that retains the freshness and potency. And they use whole turmeric roots, not powder. And that ladder up to naturalness. So in communication, we talk about, you don't just say something and then it's not backed up. So that helps a lot. And the fact that the product format is concentrated in shots. Now, these are only 59 ml. So if you want to visualize that, it's lesser than a bottle of essence of chicken. Okay, so that kind of communicates your perceived potency of a product like that. So with shots as their format, they have kind of cleverly positioned themselves away from the category that most of you are probably familiar with, which is the larger and more crowded category of functional drinks, which tends to be more refreshing and in volumes of at least 150 to 250 ml. So this is an excellent brand story that aligns to what the conscious consumer value, that is trust, authenticity, sustainability, transparency, and experience. And they nicely linked up to the word taste, which is so important for us in food and even beverages. This is a little bit about trust. So if you know, trust is earned over time. As a brand repeatedly delivers on their brand promise, right? So for the brand to maintain, this particular brand has maintained their #1 position in a category that, mind you, has at least 10 other brands, and it's not by mere chance. So the company has focused their business on delivering their brand promise, and that helped them to gain trust from consumers. If you looked up again, the founders of this brand, they share their wellness experience, which was triggered by an illness. And that comes across as very authentic and relatable. So in telling a brand story, be genuine, be upfront and honest about your core values and beliefs. Explain what drove your passion, why you got into the business in the first place. If you look at the sustainability story of how these drinks are crafted from the beginning, how they are mindful of every step of the way, which they say from farm to function, or in Clarence's example earlier, there was this from bean to bar. You know, the sustainability story it's highly important to the conscious consumer. So they also talk about how they have medical doctors who crafted the formulation for them so that the product functions. And so all these adds up, you know, and it communicates sustainability and transparency, which is really very important for the conscious consumer. So in your communication, communicate your sustainable sourcing efforts. Be transparent about your sourcing and supply chain, because the new consumers, this conscious consumer, they are invested in food safety and they want to know where their food comes from. So finally, I would say pay attention to the consumer experience across the points of point A, point B, point C. So what is that? It's the points of awareness, the point of buying, and the point of consuming. Because at these different points, the consumer expects, I mean, the message that will work with them will be different. So deliver the right message at the right time, the right manner, because the job to be done is simply different. So don't underestimate the power of a good brand story, because it can drive consumption, lead to higher sales and loyalty, and gives you commercial success. So the next slide, please. So, and closer to home, we're seeing the conscious consumer is going mainstream. Okay, so we have homegrown brands like Naturel that cater to a growing health conscious consumer market. Now, this brand you're probably familiar with. They've launched their organic range as early as 2004, and it continued to stay relevant with an expanded range of organic, whole grain, gluten-free type of offerings. There are also plant-based and dairy-free milk in the market, right? Although the size of price may be small locally, but in markets like US and Europe and as well as Australia, there's a stronger culture of drinking milk, and the opportunities are sizable, especially when the conscious consumer is becoming mainstream. So this is no longer a niche trend. To stay relevant, companies must consider the conscious consumer in your product portfolio strategy. So in summary, I would say that if you want to grow for decades, build a strong brand. These are two sides of the same coin, actually. And companies need to invest in knowing their consumers better than the competition, simply because the consumer is changing faster than the competition. Okay? And focus the business on delivering a superior value proposition. That's, again, stay true to your brand promise. Play to your strength, and whilst remaining open to collaboration, especially in a sharing economy, collaboration can be a win-win for you and your brands. And tell a good brand story, which is, if we've not heard enough, throughout this webinar, we're talking about the importance of a good brand story that has to be told. So align that to the consumer value of TASTE, taste. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. I certainly learned today that taste is beyond taste alone. It's also an acronym. But having said that, I appreciate you sharing your key takeaways and the importance of a good brand story. And I think the other message that came out clear to me was living the virtues of what you claim in your product. For example, the shot you explained gives you a feeling of potency, if you like. Having said that, at this point in time, we can pivot to the Q&A from our audience. But just before I do that, I just want to make 2 points. The first of all is, do keep the questions coming. We've got a few which we will handle the next few minutes. But also, just to reiterate, many of the panel speakers today are innovation advisors with IPI, and they are there to, and there's also a team beyond the few that you see today. They can address specific needs or pain points, and if you wish to pursue, I see some of the questions, for example, are a bit more specific, more regulatory oriented perhaps. So if you needed to reach IPI and have separate individual conversations, I think there's a QR code that you'll see that pop up often. So please use that to connect to IPI or ESG as the case may be. Having said that, let's perhaps go to the first question. And let me pull that up. I think this first one is actually addressed to Bridget. So Bridget, if you would take this, please. Let me just read out the question for everybody's benefit. In today's post-COVID times, consumers are willing to pay a premium for food products that can enhance their immunity, and yet their spending power has decreased due to the economic downturn. With these two opposing factors in mind, how do we determine an optimal and reasonable selling price for food products? Over to you, Bridget.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. First, I will say what is important is to understand what consumer needs, what is important versus what is nice to have, right? So when we talk about price, we talk about perceived value of the price. So it's not only the price, right? So when we talk about perceived value of the price, it's about communicating what is important for consumers. So if you have in mind, I want to communicate vegan, or I need to communicate organic, because this is where I want to play in the organic or vegan market. In this case, you know that this is the must-have claims, right? And looking at the competition in the shelf, I think there is a psychological price where you have, is it plus 20%, 30% more expensive than what exists as a mainstream from the market. Because there is one time where if it's too jumping in terms of price, consumer will not buy it. So it's very important to fix a price, not because of you, but also because of what is the benchmark in the market as an index. The second thing, if it's a problem on margin, you can also do a renovation of your product, right? And put off what is nice to have and just keep what is important. So there are many research about asking the consumer about which price they will buy. But I think another way is to look at your pack size. So I think Coca-Cola makes a good story here. It's always a can of Coca-Cola, but you have 300 ml, you have 600 ml, you have 1 liter, 600 ml, etc. So they have different pack size for different occasions. So the small pack size help also to buy, to start, to try the products. The big pack size are for the heavy users. So means, in a nutshell, answer number one, know what you want to communicate and what you want to play. Focus on your recipe renovation on the big claim that consumer want, and get rid of the rest. And third, be smart in terms of price, in terms of index versus your source of volume, and in terms of pack size if you want to recruit more consumer.
Great. Thank you, Bridget.
Can I just add to it? Sorry, Rama.
Please go ahead.
Just like to add to that, of course, yeah, it's what Bridget had mentioned, that even in pricing, when you look at the opportunity versus the channel and the occasion, so you put them all together. So in the example that she mentioned about that brand of beverage, you know, even when the size was a lot smaller and the per ml price actually is higher, the consumers who are looking to, you know, I would like this fizzy drink, but then I feel it's very unhealthy. I feel guilty if I drink too much. They'll actually be willing to pay for that. So it's not necessarily lower, because you feel that the reason for you to consume is quite different from just simply buying and have a big bottle to share with everyone in the family.
Great. Thank you for adding on, Isabella. I have a question here from the audience that I'm thinking that's really coming from the same person, so I'll combine the question, but I would ask Dr. Ong to help answer the first part, and perhaps Clarence, you can jump in on the second part. So the first part of the question is, what kind of investment is required to formulate a brand with all the certifications required for the different countries, example, USA, France, UK, and Germany? So the first question is, what kind of an investment is required? The second part of the question is, expansion to USA and Europe. How does a company start going down that path? Which I'll leave to Clarence to answer after Dr. Ong.
I guess you're talking about certification for a product. Yeah, so depend on, this is a quite open question. So the cost of certification it depends on which country you go to. If you're talking about certification of your line to qualify to produce the product for export, then that is a bigger investment. So that's why just now I talk about your fundamental capability has to be in place. Like for example, you already have your manufacturing capability is already certified, HACCP is already certified with ISO, is already certified with non-allergen and things like that. So it's easy for you to export. Because the overseas market will check on the list, is it truly non-contaminated with nut-free? Is it truly organic? Those they will check, and that's part of their due diligence to approve your product. So it's not certification of the product per se, it's a certification throughout your manufacturing capability to ensure you're compliant to the regulatory standard of the country. You may have to put pay some money for approval of the product, regulatory approval, and certainly you need to spend quite a lot of money on lab tests and things like that. I can't give you a solid number because it will very much depend on where are you in terms of capability, which country are you going to, and what product are you talking about. So it's really a big investment. I hope I kind of answered the question in a different way. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Clarence, in terms of how does a company start thinking about going overseas into export?
Thanks, Rama. I think that question is actually very important, but yet also a question which a lot of SME ask. And we realize that actually all it comes down to are a few key factors. And along the factors, actually both ESG as well as the distinguished panelists in this webinar can actually assist. So one of the most important things that we realize, SMEs in terms of, or companies in general, would need to dedicate a resource, someone whom they can see has the management influence to look at identifying, scouting, uncovering, and then taking the effort to drive business development in that country. What we've observed most companies do is that you try to manage within the resource, which is great. But however, daily operations does come in to prevent them to fully look at investing in a new market opportunity. So this will be actually one of the simplest and quickest advice I would actually ask companies to explore. In that journey, the question is, then how do we look at getting this additional person? Where do we find such skill sets? This is where ESG can actually come in to assist in two ways. One, when it comes to your HR strategy, finding talents or building an internal pipeline of people ready to understand the market and help you to explore, to do business development, ESG have talent schemes that can assist you to do so. Secondly, when you do need to go into the market with that resource, we are on the ground to help you to expand your network and to connect. Currently, right now, we actively look at a few ways of doing so. One, a lot of people would say, when I want to start, I want to sense where the market opportunities are. Attending trade fairs are actually the most important because they help you to get a sense of distributors, buyers, more importantly, also about what are the competitors doing. For those reasons, actually in our regions, I would like to name a few of these important trade shows in case you already have not known them. For example, in US, we have the Summer Fancy Foods, which is usually done in New York in June. Winter Fancy Foods, done in San Francisco in January. Natural Product Expo, Anaheim in March, as well as the White Labeling exhibition, which is in Chicago in November. In Europe, we also have SIAL, which is a SIAL, Paris, which is done in France, and Anuga, and that's done in Cologne. And these two usually do in alternating years. When you do participate, ESG can also help in another way, to help to facilitate on the ground business connections. And if you are thinking of not attending this, but we can consolidate a group of like-minded companies who want to look at specific markets, specific segments, we can also do a mission where we can target based on the companies who attend, what are their needs, who are the business partners they're looking for, and more importantly, what are the information they require and can bring partners together. I think this is actually one of the most important first steps to look at entering into overseas market, and more so for US and for Europe. So this is a quick comment. I hope it answers the question.
Great. Thank you, Clarence. Very, very clear and helpful. Having said that, there is another question which I'm going to excuse me, address to Isabella, because this concerns branding and product refresh, if you like. So the question is, one observation is that while some brands do well to stay true to their branding and core values, consumer tastes also change, and therefore refreshing of brand and product portfolios is needed. In this aspect, what extent or how often do you see such change needed in the North American and European markets? Over to you, Isabella.
Yeah. So yes, it's true that the consumer is constantly evolving. They don't stay still. I mean, rarely do you have a product that doesn't change its formula for more than 100 years, although there's one that I worked on. But the thing is, you need to stay relevant to their needs. And if it requires that, for example, let me go back to the example that I shared on Naturel. I mean, if the company had not launched this brand, they may not have been able to cater to the health conscious consumer with an organic range using some of their existing brand. So that's one. So sometimes the brand that you have in your stable of brands, you may not be able to fit the proposition that the value proposition that the consumers now seek, right? That's one. And two, even in your product range, if the consumers, the taste are going towards, I mean, the simpler ones would be if they are going towards, let's say, sugar-free and all that, that's you can still stay within the same brand, right? But once you go beyond, to something, let's say, from animal protein to plant protein, that's something very different. So you will need to think of how you treat the product with your new product, as well as to launch it to the market with the new proposition. So how often? It really depends on the market, right? But I think for US and Europe, I would say that even if you know, the word we use is evolving. It's only with COVID that everything got accelerated. So things don't change overnight like that. Usually the signs are there. It's for us. When your boots are on the ground, you can pick it up. So with ESG on the ground, or maybe your customers, your distributors there on the ground, they can help pick up these shifts in consumers' preferences, taste, and change. You know, so you have to remain open to listen to all this input that come from your network as well. You know, very often we tend to stick to what we have and think that it works. Please don't break it. Don't change it. Yeah.
Great.
Maybe Clarence want to add how often from your US perspective, yeah, you see people have changed or not, maybe.
Actually, when it comes to brand, it takes a long time to build a brand. I think it's quite critical that right from the start, we establish the brand positioning for the segment that we are really going to invest in. And from there on, actually, we notice that the brands typically do not change often, but the delivery of the brand promise, be it in the tweaking of the product, the way that it's delivered can evolve, but the overall brand positioning will stay quite similar. So this is really, I guess, it varies across companies, but a short answer to that question is once you have identified that brand, that segment, you do need time to build, and therefore don't change it too fast. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Clarence. Wise words. Having said that, just for everybody on the line, we are getting quite a few questions, many of them that would be of interest to the broader group. So I would respectfully ask that we can extend for another 5 minutes. So we will carry on. So we'll end at 10:50 instead of 10:45 Singapore time. But having said that, let me try and squeeze in one more question for Bridget. And Bridget, here, I think you're going to have to pick up your crystal ball a little bit. Because the question really is, do you think there will be a day where the supermarket shelf would be totally replaced by organic, healthier snacks, healthier dairy alternatives, recyclable packaging materials, etc.? Since more and more consumers are better informed about what they consume and how they consume. If yes, why do you think that is the case? And if you don't think that will happen, why? Bridget, I think you're muted. Would you unmute, please?
Yeah, it's a crystal ball, right? But I think when we look at the food revolution I was describing at the beginning, and if you see the shelf of the supermarket, convenience stores, or even specialty channel, you see the importance, growing importance of plant-based, for example, and organic. So many years ago, plant-based was just the market leader, and now you see a full range of products really for plant-based. And the same for organic. Organic was in a corner on a shelf, now you see more space. So now talking about 100% transformation of all the shelf and all the category, I don't believe this, because at the end of the day, you have different consumers and you have different needs, and you have to pay for it, right? So not everybody has the same pocket. So, but definitely the revolution is already going, and you will see some categories, especially on health, where this trend will be more maximized. But of course, when you are looking for as a consumer something like a pleasure, something which is social needs, etc., like in snack, etc., it will not be the #1 priority, because at the end of the day, what you like Isabel explained also, is a taste, right? It's about having something very tasty. But you will need to reassure consumer that it's no artificial, not fried, baked, etc., etc. So the revolution is on March, but I don't believe it will be 100% due to cost for enterprise as well.
Okay, thank you, Isabella. I think there's one more question, which if I may address that to Dr. Ong. This is kind of related. Earlier on, it was a question about how much would it cost. Here, the question is more about how long would it take for companies to get their food products ready for export, assuming tweaking of recipes is required. what skill sets and talent should they be looking at for such a project?
Oh, thanks. I think this is a favorite CEO question. When can I launch? When can I export? I may ask Joe to help me to bring up my second slide in my presentation so I can articulate better. So first and foremost, assuming your company already have basic capability to produce product, basic R&D capability to renovate product, to change recipe. So that fundamental is on already present. So typically when we are talking about renovation, recipe changes, we are talking about renovation, line extension or recipe changes. So for all product, once you touch recipe, it is actually quite sensitive because it can affect the shelf life, it can affect the taste and the quality. So depend on how much change are you going to take place. Is it a big change or it's just a small change? For example, recipe change from animal-based to plant-based, that is a big change, huge change. It will take about 1 year to 2 years, depends on the technology as well. Whereas recipe change because of the color and flavor, that is quite easy. Yeah, so then you come back to the second question, do you need to do shelf life test? Shelf life test normally takes some time. And it is important to do shelf life test, especially for export market, because you don't want product to be not performing well or quality issue or food safety issue, even during transportation or on arrival in overseas market. So shelf life test is essential. So typical shelf life test will take you about 3 months. This is when you do an accelerated shelf life test. It is good enough, but not perfect. On top of that, you normally cover with the usual shelf life test. Then for export market, we also need to be very careful. Their condition, weather condition is going to be very different from us. Those who export product overseas, if your product go through winter time during the journey, shipment, you all know that that will affect the product. So in a nutshell, it is depend on the product, but typically it is with a basic capability, in-house capability, or you know where to tap the capability. So recipe change could be 6 to 12 months. That is also depending whether you can have your procurement team source new product easily. You can get FDA approval, EU approval on time. You can get your logistics sorted out. So, and therefore I hesitant to answer the question, but it is very much depend. But typically, if it is a small change, it's 6 months. Or if you're a bigger chain, maybe 12 months. If you need new technology, new machine, then it's a longer than 1 year typically, because it will take time to buy the equipment and asset. This is talking about new technology, different technology. I hope I give you a bit of the picture. If you want to know and more detail, we can take it offline and discuss separately, because it very much depends on what product you're talking about and what basic capability you already have. Right. I hope that helped you to understand a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ong. I think in these kind of questions is really a directional guidance. And every case is going to be different. And as Dr. Ong said, we'll be happy to take that one offline for specifics. Obviously, this topic has generated a lot of interest. There are a lot of questions, but I did promise you we will try not to run 5 minutes over time. And it's now 10:47, so we've got 3 minutes. So in these last 3 minutes, what I'd like to be able to do is to address each of the panel speakers. And if there was one key takeaway message that you had for our audience today, what would it be? So can I start with Bridget?
You're muted.
Yeah, I would say act quickly. Consumer will drive new consumption habits, consume less, but consume better. So opportunity to drive your brand's purpose, crystallize what is your owner story, what you want to say, and embrace new mindfulness consumer trends.
Great. And Dr. Ong?
I would just have one sentence. Let's work together now to expand our Singapore food export successfully. And the keyword is now and not tomorrow.
Good point. I'm glad you reminded us of that. And Isabella?
Yeah, so I like to say that SMEs, they are in a good position because they are more agile than the larger players. So therefore, they should leverage their agility to approach the sustainability to strengthen their value proposition to this group of consumers.
Okay. And Clarence?
Well, there's quite a few messages. Some saying we need to act now. The window is there. I will just add on to say that, is it too difficult? The answer is yes and no. But with ESG and IPI and the Innovation Advisors, we can do it together.
Excellent. Thank you all. And great parting points. If I can add my own, other than learning a new word, taste, which is an acronym today, to me, is the Singapore brand name and food reputation precedes us already with as many positive attributes. And I think we have a strong launch pad here with the kind of ecosystem we have in Singapore. And as Clarence said, I echo that with ESG and IPI help, we can indeed move forward quickly. So at this point, I'd really like to thank the panel for sharing your experience, perspectives, and advice, and also to all of the participants where your questions show a high level of interest and engagement. I apologize we were not able to get to all of the questions, but IPI will separately follow with each of you after this. At this point, please let me invite our MC Faith Teng back into the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Rama. Before you go, I'd like to invite you to fill our post-webinar survey through the link displayed in the chat box to give us a feedback. If you would like a free consultation with IPI to discuss about your innovation needs or find out more about the Innovation Advisors Programme, please also indicate your interest in the form. And the link to download the slides will be sent to you after we have received your feedback. Like Rama mentioned, if you are unable to answer your questions during the session, we'll follow up with you separately. If you did not manage to leave your name with your questions, please also contact us so that we can get back to you regarding your questions. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and a big thank you to all our speakers for sharing these valuable insights with us. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to having you again in our next webinar.